What if I told you that that supposedly heart-healthy single glass of wine you had with dinner last night didn't just give you a fleeting buzz? Like, what if it actively, physically shrank the gray matter inside your skull?
Right. I mean, you probably picture having a few drinks after a long day as just a temporary thing. You have a drink, you feel a little sleepy, and then you wake up the next morning, grab some coffee, and your brain just sort of reboots.
Yeah, exactly. Like a software glitch that completely clears out when you restart the computer.
Well, the cultural narrative is entirely built around this idea of temporary impairment. We treat alcohol like a heavy app running on our phones. It drains the battery for a few hours, maybe slows things down. But once you close the app, the device is perfectly fine. The hardware is basically untouched.
But the reality is so much more complicated and honestly, a lot more physical than that. So, welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission today is to explore how alcohol doesn't just cause a temporary chemical imbalance.
Right, it goes way beyond that.
Exactly. It actually enacts widespread, tangible, physical, and anatomical changes to your brain structure, its volume, and its neural wiring. We are diving into a massive stack of sources today for you.
We've got a lot to cover.
Oh, for sure. We've got peer-reviewed medical journals like the BMJ, PLOS, and comprehensive research from LSU Health New Orleans School of Medicine. We're also bringing in insights from top medical communicators like Harvard's Dr. Sarah Wakeman, neurobiologist Andrew Huberman, and the team from the Dr. Matt and Dr. Mike series.
And we really need to set the stakes for you right out of the gate here. The data from these sources is definitive. The modifications alcohol makes to the brain go far beyond just a weekend hangover.
Yeah, way beyond.
These are structural, microscopic, and macroscopic alterations that significantly change how your brain operates, even on the days or like the weeks when you were entirely sober.
Okay, let's unpack this, because if we stick with our computer metaphor, the sources reveal that alcohol isn't just a temporary software glitch. It is actively, physically swapping out and rewiring your brain's hardware.
Yeah, and if we are going to talk about altering the hardware, we really have to start by looking at the macro level. Like what actually happens to the physical size and mass of the brain when you introduce alcohol.
Right.
To fully grasp this, you first have to understand how effortlessly alcohol navigates the human body. The brain is normally protected by this incredibly selective security system called the blood-brain barrier.
Which is super important, obviously.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It acts like a highly sophisticated bouncer, basically keeping most toxins, pathogens, and heavy metals out of the brain's delicate environment.
But alcohol somehow just has an all-access VIP pass to get past the bouncer.
It does. And it comes down to its unique chemical structure. Alcohol is both water-soluble and fat-soluble because the membranes of our cells are made of lipids, which are fats. Alcohol just dissolves right through them.
Wow.
It cruises past the blood-brain barrier and easily permeates the cells and tissues of your brain.
Yeah.
And once it arrives, the body's enzymes start metabolizing it, converting that ethanol into a highly toxic compound called acetaldehyde.
Wait, I need to wrap my head around this because when people hear brain damage and acetaldehyde toxicity, I mean, they immediately picture the heaviest drinkers, right? We imagine people consuming massive quantities of liquor every single day for decades.
Yeah, that's the stereotype.
But the sources are pointing at something much more common than that, aren't they?
They are. The data tells a story that honestly challenges a lot of our daily habits. Chronic consumption of even low to moderate amounts of alcohol causes visible structural damage.
And what exactly is low to moderate?
Well, when the literature says low to moderate, we are talking about 1 or 2 drinks a day. That equates to roughly 7 to 14 drinks a week.
Which is wildly common. I mean, that's just splitting a bottle of wine with a partner over dinner or having a couple of beers while watching a football game on Sunday.
Exactly. Andrew Huberman highlights a massive, incredibly robust study from the UK Biobank to illustrate this. The researchers didn't just look at a few dozen people. They analyzed the high-resolution MRI brain scans of over 35,000 generally healthy, middle-aged, and older adults.
That is a huge sample size.
It's massive.
Yeah.
And these were everyday people reporting that exact low to moderate intake. And the scans showed a literal physical thinning of the neocortex.
Okay, just as a quick refresher, the neocortex being the outer, highly folded layer of the brain, right? The part responsible for higher level thinking, complex planning, and our associative memories.
Yeah, it's essentially the seat of human intellect.
Yeah.
And the constant presence of acetaldehyde and the metabolic stress of processing alcohol causes an overall loss of neurons in that area. The cells are literally dying off.
That's terrifying.
What's fascinating here is how precisely the MRI scans can map this shrinkage and how perfectly linear it is. It's entirely dose-dependent. The more alcohol consumed, the more the brain shrinks.
Wow, so it just scales directly.
Exactly. The imaging reveals a distinct reduction of both gray matter, which consists of the actual cell bodies of the neurons where the processing happens, and white matter.
And white matter is like the axonal tracts, right? Those myelin-coated cables that connect different brain regions and allow them to communicate quickly. Spot on.
So the processing centers themselves are shrinking, and the high-speed cables connecting them are physically deteriorating at the same time.
Yes. And as that brain tissue physically shrinks and loses mass, the fluid-filled spaces inside the center of the brain, called ventricles, they have to enlarge to fill the empty space left behind inside the rigid skull.
That paints a grim picture.
It does. Dr. Sarah Wakeman actually notes that when she looks at the brain scans of chronic drinkers, this accelerated volume loss makes their brains look physically much older than their chronological age. Like, a 50-year-old moderate drinker might have the physical brain volume of someone in their late 60s.
Wait, I have to push back on this a little, or at least ask for some clarification, because it feels like it contradicts everything we've been told.
I know exactly what you're going to say.
Right, because we've all heard the cultural narrative about the heart-healthy single glass of red wine every night. Are you saying that even that single, supposedly beneficial glass of wine is actively physically shrinking the brain's gray matter?
Yeah. Does this mean there is absolutely zero safe biological dose when it comes to brain volume?
Based on the anatomical evidence from these massive population studies, there is no free ride. Even one drink a day contributes to this measurable thinning and volume loss.
Wow.
There's no magical threshold where alcohol suddenly flips from being a toxin to being protective for brain mass. It is an indiscriminate solvent that causes cell death and structural shrinkage at virtually any regular dose.
That is a staggering paradigm shift for anyone listening who thinks they are doing their body a favor with a nightcap. I mean, wow.
It really changes how you look at it.
It does, but the danger isn't just that the brain is losing overall mass, right? The sources reveal that the brain mass left behind is being actively rewired. The literal architecture of how you behave is shifting.
Yes, exactly. We have to move from the macro level down to the synaptic level to see this. Synapses are the microscopic connections where neurons communicate.
Okay, synapses, got it.
And alcohol has a profoundly suppressive effect on the prefrontal cortex, which is the region of your brain situated right behind your forehead. This area is essentially the CEO of your brain.
Right, the decision maker.
Exactly. It's responsible for behavioral control, flexible thinking, and what neuroscientists call top-down inhibition.
Top-down inhibition is basically the brain's braking system, right? Like it's the voice in your head that says, hey, maybe don't say that highly inappropriate joke out loud, or maybe don't eat that entire second pizza.
That's a perfect way to describe it. When you introduce alcohol, the prefrontal cortex is one of the first areas to go offline.
Which explains so much.
Right. That suppression is why people become more talkative, louder, and act on their immediate impulses without forethought. But the critical takeaway from the research is that regular drinking forces the brain to rewire its physical connections to adapt to this constant suppression.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because the brain doesn't just passively lose connections, it actually builds new ones in the absolute wrong places.
Yes, it does.
The sources show that alcohol increases the number of synapses in the neural circuits that control habitual automated behavior, like the basal ganglia. It is literally causing physical structural growth in the pathways that execute habits you perform without thinking.
Concurrently, it causes a severe reduction, like a pruning process, of the synapses in the prefrontal cortex circuits responsible for impulse control. The brain is actively shifting its resources.
It's like the brain is actively paving a massive multi-lane superhighway for our bad habits and our worst impulses, while letting the bridge for self-control completely rust and collapse.
That visual perfectly captures the anatomy of what is happening. Because of these synaptic shifts, regular drinkers are left physically more prone to impulsivity and habitual behaviors. Their brain architecture has been fundamentally modified.
It's just wild to think about.
So think about the lived experience of this. On a Tuesday morning, when an individual is completely sober and hasn't had a drop to drink in days, their brain is still literally wired to be more impulsive.
Even fully sober.
Even fully sober. They might find themselves snapping at a coworker or mindlessly scrolling on their phone, less capable of stopping habitual actions because the physical brakes have been removed.
Man. To understand why the brain is rewiring these superhighways and tearing down these bridges, we really have to zoom in even further. We need to go down to the microscopic cellular level to see how the brain anatomically fights back against alcohol just to survive the environment it's being put in.
This takes us right into the realm of neurochemistry. The medical communicators Dr. Matt and Dr. Mike explain this beautifully, using the concept of homeostasis.
Right, the balancing act.
Exactly. Imagine a biological seesaw. Your body's primary goal at all times is to keep this seesaw perfectly level, perfectly balanced, so your nervous system is neither too excited nor too depressed.
Right, and acute alcohol completely throws an anvil onto one side of that seesaw. Alcohol acts as a central nervous system depressant. It artificially increases the effectiveness of a neurotransmitter called GABA.
Which is crucial to understand.
Right, because GABA is your brain's primary inhibitory neurotransmitter. It tells neurons to quiet down and stop firing. And at the exact same time, alcohol decreases the effectiveness of a neurotransmitter called glutamate, which is excitatory. It tells neurons to fire and activate.
And to make matters worse, it restricts the flow of calcium into the neurons, which they absolutely need to release their signals properly.
So it's a triple threat.
It really is. The result is massive systemic inhibition and suppressed excitation. The seesaw is literally pinned to the floor. Now, if you only do this once a year, your brain recovers fine.
Sure.
But if you do this chronically, even with just a couple of drinks a night, your brain realizes it cannot survive in this constantly depressed, sedated state. It has to level the seesaw. So it makes physical, anatomical adjustments to the actual cells.
It literally changes the hardware again. It doesn't just change the chemicals floating around. It changes the receiving dishes on the cells themselves.
Precisely. The brain actively decreases the number of available inhibitory GABA receptors. It pulls them right out of the cell membrane. Yeah, it's essentially boarding up the doors so the calming GABA neurotransmitters can't get inside. Simultaneously, the brain actively increases the number of excitatory glutamate receptors and builds more calcium channels, desperately trying to catch any excitatory signal it can.
It's fighting for its life, basically.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this anatomical shift perfectly explains the cycle of building tolerance.
Oh, right.
Has you ever wondered why a regular drinker needs 3 glasses of wine to feel the exact same relaxation they used to get from just one? It's not just in their head.
The receptors are gone.
Their brain has physically removed the receptors that allow them to feel the relaxing effects of GABA, and it has built a hyperactive, highly sensitive, excitatory system to fight through the alcohol.
Yeah, let me make sure I'm following the logic here. Because if the brain has built this high-revving, anxious, highly excitatory engine just to function normally under the weight of alcohol, what happens when the person stops drinking?
That's the million-dollar question.
Severe withdrawal isn't just the body missing the alcohol, right? It's the body dealing with an engine that is suddenly redlining because the heavy blanket of alcohol has been ripped away.
That is the exact mechanism. Withdrawal is fundamentally a physical, anatomical hangover. When the alcohol is removed, the artificial suppression of the nervous system disappears instantly.
Instantly.
But the brain doesn't adapt instantly. It is still stuck with a severely depleted number of calming GABA receptors and a massive overabundance of stimulating glutamate receptors and calcium channels.
So the seesaw violently slams in the opposite direction.
Yes, the brain is suddenly bombarded by stimulatory signals it has no physical ability to turn down. This neuronal overactivity is why severe alcohol withdrawal manifests as debilitating anxiety, uncontrollable tremors, confusion, hallucinations, and in extreme cases, life-threatening seizures.
Because the brain is just short-circuiting.
The electrical storm in the brain is simply too intense for the depleted hardware to handle.
And looking at the BMJ source, this perfectly explains why medical detox protocols in hospitals rely heavily on benzodiazepines. Those drugs artificially stimulate the few remaining GABA receptors to force the brakes back on.
Exactly, balancing the seesaw artificially.
Right, so the brain doesn't seize while it slowly, painstakingly rebuilds its normal receptor levels over a matter of weeks.
Right, and when that cellular engine redlines for too long, or when the brain is exposed to high concentrations of that toxic acetaldehyde we mentioned earlier, the brain's incredible ability to adapt eventually fails entirely.
And that's when things get really dark.
That is when the damage crosses a terrifying line. We move from structural modification and receptor changes into permanent neurodegeneration and cell death.
And it's crucial to understand that this degeneration isn't just an isolated event happening exclusively inside the skull. It is deeply connected to the rest of the body. Heavy chronic alcohol use promotes severe brain inflammation, and incredibly, a massive portion of that inflammation actually starts in the gut.
Yes, we are talking about the gut-liver-brain axis. We mentioned earlier that alcohol is a potent solvent. When you drink it, it acts as an indiscriminate sterilizer in your digestive tract, destroying the healthy microbiome.
Which is bad enough on its own.
But more importantly, as a solvent, it weakens and damages the tight junctions, the protective seals lining your intestinal walls.
It's like pouring acid onto a coffee filter until the paper starts to rip.
That is exactly the right concept.
No.
This leads to leaky gut syndrome. The intestinal walls become abnormally porous. Harmful bacteria and endotoxins that should be safely confined to your digestive tract escape through those weakened seals and enter the bloodstream.
Meanwhile, the liver is working absolutely overtime, struggling to metabolize the alcohol. As it becomes stressed and damaged, it releases inflammatory signaling proteins called cytokines.
Those inflammatory cytokines, along with the escaped gut bacteria, travel directly through the bloodstream. And because the blood-brain barrier has also been weakened by the alcohol, these inflammatory agents cross right into the brain.
Which causes massive systemic neuroinflammation.
Right. This chronic, smoldering inflammatory state significantly elevates the risk of developing Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia later in life, because the brain's immune cells are constantly in overdrive, inadvertently damaging healthy tissue.
But there's also a very specific, rapid, and terrifying form of neurodegeneration tied directly to alcohol, which the sources highlight, right? Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome.
Yeah, this is a profound neurological condition driven by an alcohol-induced deficiency in thiamine, which is vitamin B1. Thiamine is absolutely essential for cells to convert glucose into energy.
Okay, energy for the cells.
But chronic alcohol abuse inflames the stomach lining so severely that it absolutely devastates the body's ability to absorb thiamine from food.
And without thiamine to create energy, the highly active brain cells literally starve, suffocate, and die. The BMJ details how this presents as Wernicke encephalopathy in the emergency room.
It's awful to see.
Yeah, patients come in with severe oculomotor dysfunction, meaning their eyes are darting around or aren't tracking properly, and severe gait ataxia. They physically cannot balance or walk because the neurons in their cerebellum are failing.
And if that acute phase isn't immediately treated with intravenous thiamine, the neuronal starvation progresses into Korsakoff syndrome. The neurotoxicity becomes so extreme that specific brain regions responsible for laying down new memories, primarily the hippocampus, suffer profound, irreversible tissue damage.
Unbelievable.
Dr. Wakeman notes that on an MRI, you can literally see the hippocampus wither and almost die. This leaves the individual with anterograde amnesia. They can remember their childhood and their past, but they are completely, permanently unable to form any new memories moving forward.
It's terrifying to visualize. It's as if the record button on the brain's internal hard drive is permanently, physically disabled by this toxic, starving environment.
It is arguably one of the most tragic outcomes of chronic alcohol use disorder. By the time the memory deficits become obvious to family members, the structural brain death has already occurred, and the damage to the hippocampus is permanent.
Okay, after laying out all of this incredibly heavy information, from the dose-dependent gray matter shrinkage to the leaky gut cytokines to the starvation of the hippocampus, we need to answer the most urgent question you, our listener, are almost certainly having right now.
Is it permanent?
Exactly. Is this a permanent life sentence? If you've been drinking moderately for years, shrinking your neocortex and paving a superhighway for bad habits, are you stuck with that modified brain forever, or can it actually heal?
Well, the literature gives us immense hope here. The human brain is a remarkably resilient organ. It possesses a high degree of neuroplasticity, which is its ability to reorganize itself, form new neural connections, and repair damaged pathways.
Thank goodness.
Fortunately, a significant majority of the physical changes we've discussed are reversible.
And the sources give us an exact timeline for this healing process. If an individual completely abstains from drinking, meaning total abstinence, not just cutting back to weekends or switching to lighter beer for a period of 2 to 6 months, the brain's neural circuits can often remodel themselves and return to their normal baseline state.
That's right.
The overall brain volume can begin to restore as the toxic stress is removed, and those overgrown habit circuits can be pruned back down to size.
The caveat, however, is important to mention. For individuals who have consumed massive amounts of alcohol chronically over many, many years, some of that structural brain damage and volume loss may indeed be permanent.
Okay, so it depends on the severity.
Right. The brain can cleverly compensate by routing around damaged areas, but it cannot always fully regenerate dead neuronal tissue. But for the vast majority of moderate daily drinkers, that 2 to 6 month window of complete abstinence serves as a profound biological reset.
That's incredible.
This raises an important question for anyone listening who regularly consumes alcohol, even just a glass a night. What is your actual normal baseline?
Oh, that's a great point.
If your brain has been physically, chemically adapting to alcohol for years, constantly adjusting the homeostasis seesaw, you might not even know what your true, unmodified brain feels like.
So, what does this all mean? If a listener actually takes that 2 to 6 month break, can they literally feel their prefrontal cortex regaining control over their habits? Or is this healing entirely silent and microscopic?
Oh, the changes are palpable. They
Yeah.
will absolutely feel it in their daily lives. As the GABA and glutamate receptors slowly normalize to their natural levels, their baseline anxiety, that low-level hum of stress, will drop significantly.
That sounds amazing.
Right. And as the prefrontal cortex regains its synaptic density and the braking system comes back online, they will likely find it remarkably easier to resist impulsive urges. And not just regarding alcohol, but in all areas of life: dieting, impulse spending, emotional regulation.
Because they aren't fighting a structural superhighway anymore, the bridge of self-control is rebuilt. It's incredible to think about how deeply physical our behavior really is. We've taken quite a journey today. We started at the macro level, looking at the startling reality that even 1 or 2 drinks a day accelerates the aging of the brain, causing physical, dose-dependent shrinkage of both gray and white matter, and thinning out the neocortex.
And then we zoomed in to see how alcohol acts as an architect, physically rewiring the synapses. It promotes the unchecked growth of habitual behaviors while stripping away the vital neural connections we rely on for impulse control and top-down inhibition.
Yeah, and we went all the way down to the cellular level to watch the brain rip out its own calming GABA receptors and flood itself with excitatory glutamate receptors just to keep the biological seesaw balanced, which leaves it horribly exposed to the dangerous, anxious redlining of withdrawal.
We tracked how alcohol acts as a solvent in the gut, sending toxic inflammation up to the brain, risking dementia and memory loss. And finally, we saw the incredible neuroplastic hope that just a few months of abstinence can physically rebuild the hardware.
That's a lot to take in.
The overarching lesson from all these medical sources is that we have to stop treating alcohol solely as a fleeting emotional experience or a temporary software glitch. We must start recognizing it for what it is: an active, highly effective biological agent that changes our anatomy.
And that leaves us with a final thought for you to mull over today. Alcohol is essentially a structural architect operating inside the human skull.
It really is.
So, if a widely accepted, perfectly legal substance can physically reconstruct our neural wiring, pave superhighways for our worst impulses, and shrink our gray matter from just a moderate daily dose, well, what does that mean for how we define safe consumption in our culture? Are we unknowingly sculpting our own brains into more impulsive, habitual, and anxious versions of ourselves just for the sake of unwinding at the end of the day, when in reality we are permanently swapping out the hardware? Something to think about the next time you pour a glass.